Well, anyway, thank you all for coming. My first memories are of the orchestra. Going to Saratoga Springs, and we had a place out on the Hudson there, and seeing all you guys. Like I said, Marguerite, I had a crush on her when I was small. Still do. Sorry, honey. Obviously, my dad's made some very good friends, and certainly appreciate you guys coming out. And I know he really was excited about this for the last couple months, and he's a special guy. But I know that everybody here is very special to my father, and really, and it shows with the efforts you guys made to come out. I know it wasn't easy, and I love you, Dad. I mean, it's
Yeah.
We love you, Jerry. Yeah, we totally do. All right, Dad's speech.
Ready for me to make a speech?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
so anyway.
So in the shadow of my brother, I traveled with the orchestra for 13 years. And I got to know a lot of you, and really enjoyed it. I feel like we're all family. I know your family. My dad, he spent 61 years with you guys. That's got to be a record. I know he loves you all, and from the emails we've been getting and the phone calls, he was obviously very much loved in the orchestra.
Oh, and that card, the card that
Did you get the card?
we were able to get.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and this is a night we'll all remember forever, and we'll see you at the next 100th birthday.
As my dad saying, hey, this next 100 years you're going to get it right.
All right. Do you want to get out? Yeah. Or are you going to stand?
I don't know if I should. Could I get out to make the speech?
No,
You're good, right there.
Am I good here?
Yeah.
Well, I wish that the next 100 years will be a lot easier than the first 100 years.
Sorry.
I can tell you that first 100 years was not easy. When I was born, it was already, the economy was down to nothing. We were in terrible condition. My poor mother had to go to work. My sister had to go to work. My brother went to work. Everybody went to work except me. So my brother said, I had one brother a little older than me, how come he doesn't work? My mother said, because he plays the violin. Well, it's true. As a boy, 10 or 13, I used to make money going out and playing. And there were various areas where I used to play with a string trio, a piano trio, and we used to come back. I used to come back with maybe $25, $30. As soon as I walked in the door, my mother would go, take the money, and then she gave me $1. But I started to make money already when I was 9 or 10. So I did quite well as a child, and I made some money, and then I showed some promise of being a violinist. And then my teacher said I should go to Juilliard in New York. So mother said, I'll go with you. I was only 17. So I went to New York to study the violin at Juilliard School of Music. Now, Juilliard, it was a terrible, difficult place. Nobody was any good. If you asked a student, how good was he? He stinks. Every time somebody played, he stinks. Nobody was any good. I played a recital. Somebody asked, how was the recital? He stunk. It was no good. But that Juilliard was very stressful. Well, I finally got through. In 1941, I was 21 years old, I graduated Juilliard. Looking forward to what was a career in performing. They had a managers all ready for us to go and perform. I had a manager appointed to me, and I had to learn a certain amount of repertoire, and then I would go off on the stage. And everything looked really great when all of a sudden one morning I woke up, the Japanese dropped the bombs on Pearl Harbor. Right away, the school said, you better study another instrument, maybe a French horn, so you can get into the army band. Because you don't have to play the violin, Anyway, I played for Dmitri Metropolis, and he heard me play, and he said he would like me in the orchestra, maybe on the second stand, first violin. I said, but I'm going to be drafted. He said, I know. He said, when that time comes, we'll worry about it. So I played in the Minneapolis Symphony until from September until April or May. Then my draft form came in, and Metropolis tried to keep me out. There was no way I could stay out. I was in good shape, perfect health. So I was drafted. So I got into the service. Everything looked really gloomy. Anyway, I played a recital for this, while I was in the Army, I played a recital for the soldiers, and the general of the camp was there. And he invited me, there was a party, I was at the party, and the general said, you know, you don't want to be in the infantry. And I said, no. He says, why don't you can join the medical corps? So I became a medic. And I was trained as a medical technician. I worked in the operating room. And I want to tell you, I don't want to talk about it, but I was then, I went to Camp Grant, and I had 1 year of training, and then we were shipped off to England. Then I went to England, and we started to build the hospital. Then the captain said, the workers here won't let anybody build that hospital except the English workers. And they always had their tea in the afternoon, and they was taking them so long to build a hospital. The major thought maybe, the general thought maybe we should build another hospital, let that one, then build that, we'll build another one or something. But anyway, we finally did get the hospital built. And then all of a sudden, the war, the soldiers had landed in Sicily. And we started to get people from Sicily, soldiers who were wounded. And one day a soldier came in, he was a friend of mine from my street, he was a lieutenant, and I met him, he was in the war in Sicily, he had been injured and came. Anyway, we were then, I didn't realize this, but one day we were alerted to move from the camp in England. We moved to Dover, and we had tents, I had a pup tent with a friend of mine, we stayed there, and they were giving us passes as if nothing was going to happen. We were actually preparing for the invasion of Normandy, and I didn't know that. And one night I was out, and when I came back, my friend said, you know, they called your name. So I was then alerted. I headed the whole group to go to Normandy on the day of the invasion. Now the day of the invasion was very long. They called it the longest day. When I arrived to the beachhead, I saw that there were bombs exploding all over the place. And I climbed down about the boat. They had ladders. I climbed down, I had a violin on my back. One of the lieutenants said, let me take the violin. The lieutenant helped me with the violin down the ropes. And we landed in the LSD craft, took up the boat trip to the shore. At that time, the water was just a little bit rough, but I didn't have to go into the water. They had put a little stage platform for us to walk on. So I walked on the platform onto the beach. I don't want to talk about that, but they were still firing bullets from a ridge, but our troops had already got to the top of the ridge, and that all stopped. But I was able then to get through the beach. As I walked through the beach, what I didn't know is, without knowing it, I had walked through the minefield. There was a minefield on that beach, and I had walked through it with my friend. And one of the officers said, do you realize what you just did? You walked through a minefield. I could have been, the Germans had mined the whole beach. They mined the beach, they mined everything. And I walked through it, I couldn't believe this. Wow. I took one final look as I went inshore to see all the boats. It was a scene that was unbelievable. The Zeppelins up in the air, they had these boats to stop airplanes from flying over. Our airplanes could not fly over with this cloudy day. So we didn't have any support from airplanes. But I walked through the beach, along the beach, and I'm with a friend of mine, and we were lost. We didn't know where our company was. So we walked along this path, and we passed a group of German soldiers that were also on the beach, walking in the other direction. I saw a movie where the same thing, they showed that there, where we were walking this way and the Germans were walking that way. And we didn't see each other. But then we finally got to a certain point. It was not easy. Our troops were all landing little by little and advancing. And they had to go through what they call hedgerows. Every farm had like a place which was with trees around it, and there was a field where they planted stuff, what they were called hedgerows. The Germans were hiding behind the hedgerows, but we finally were able to push through. I followed the troops. Now, if you saw the movie Gang of Brothers, that's what it was. We followed this group as a gang of brothers through the hedgerows. Then we were there for quite some time, and all of a sudden we were going to move on to Paris. The Germans were leaving Paris. As I left, Rundstedt had a captured German prisoners. Over 60,000 German prisoners were in one spot there. And as I went past them, they waved to us. Their guns were piled up this way. The German prisoners waved goodbye. So we went on, and we marched, and I remember marching under the Champs-Élysées, under the Eiffel Tower, through the bridge. Later on, the Germans had marched through there when they had captured Paris. So anyway, we got into Paris, we stayed there a little while, and then we moved on to Belgium. And as the places were liberated, we kept moving. I was in Belgium there on November the 24th. We had a hospital, the 15th General. We took over a hospital unit. One day I went to get something out of the mailbox or something. And there was a room with no windows. And suddenly, so I still remember a big hitting the ground, face this way. A bomb exploded, a huge bomb, and threw me to the ground, but there was no glass. The people that were in the other room where there was glass were killed. Everybody there was killed. The glass became like killed them. So there I was laying on the floor, and I had brain concussion, and I was bleeding all over. But I was picked up by a guy, and I still remember his name, Craig Shepard, carried me out of the flames and took me away from the flame. I lay on the cot, and they gave me blood. And then I was sent to the Ardennes forest, where there was a tent hospital. And I stayed in that hospital for about 2 weeks. I still have a picture of myself in the hospital with a friend who was later killed in action. Now, I lost a lot of friends in that time. Never forget them. And then we moved on. After that, the commanding officer said, you know, you don't have to go on, you can go home. This was December the 12th of 1945. Says, you know, you were wounded and you shouldn't come back, why don't you just go home? I said, I want to stay with my friends. So I went back to the hospital. And that very next day, the Germans broke through our lines, and it was called the Battle of the Bulge. So I went through the Battle of the Bulge. I was pretty sick. I had all kinds of noises in my head from the concussion. But I didn't pay much attention to this. It's because I didn't realize that later on in life, it all came back. It doesn't leave. All of the things that I went through in that war always stayed with me to this day. My friends that died, I had 3 wonderful friends. I saw them all dead. People don't, when I talk about it, people don't want to hear it. It's terrible. Anyway, I went through all of that, and then I met a young Belgian girl. Her name was Gabrielle, their dad, and that was their grandmother. Yeah, that was their mother, actually. Gabrielle was their mother. So her name was Gabrielle. I met her, and when the war ended, we got married. And Gabrielle came to the United States. We brought on a troop ship after the war. So I landed and I went back to the Minneapolis Symphony where I had a job for a short time. Then I went to New York. And as I was telling somebody, I was walking past the Center Theater in New York. And I saw a stage door, the door opened, and a guy by the name of Goshkowitz that I used to know when I was at Juilliard came out, and I said, "Hey, Harry." He said, "Hi, Terry." He said, "You know, I just became concertmaster of the Center Theater." Wonderful. Are there any more openings? I don't think so. But I stayed there, and I don't know why. I opened the stage door and went down, and two very well-dressed men were coming up. And they saw me, and I said, "You know, I just got out of the service. Would you listen to me play?" One was the contractor of that, and one was the conductor, David Mendoza, of the orchestra. So I played for them. And they said, well, okay. Afterwards, I got a telephone call. They said, "We would like you to be the concertmaster of the Center Theater."
Oh, wow.
I didn't know what I was getting into. So I come there to the first rehearsal, and Goshkowitz is sitting in the concertmaster's chair. And the contractor comes over to him and tells him to move. And he goes, "What?" And he sees me. Well, the look could kill. One look well, I had to sit with Goshkowitz. Well, luckily I have a good memory because the music was always falling on the floor. We had a music about this thick, a book. Every time they turned the page, you go, "Oh." But I had to keep on playing, you know. Sometimes I played with whatever came into my head, and the conductor didn't even know it. I'm making up he didn't even know it. Anyway, I stayed at the Center Theater for 4 years. Then I went back to New York. I was living in New York at the time. Gabrielle was there. She was pretty good. Then we moved. There was an opening I found out in the Philadelphia Orchestra. And before that, in 1950, I went on tour with the Kiss Me Kate show. I was a concertmaster of the orchestra and assistant conductor of Kiss Me Kate. So I went on tour with them. We went all over the United States, and I met very wonderful people. And the pianist in that group was just great. He knew every concerto that I could play, and I played recitals with him on the tour. I kept up my violin playing. Then I got back to New York. I worked at very good work in New York. I tried out for the orchestra, and I never expected to make it. There were 3 people from the Curtis Institute trying out. One of them had played solo with the orchestra 3 times in her life as a child, as an adult.
Wow.
And I thought sure she was going to get that job. There was only one opening. So I played, and I was getting ready to leave. And there was a guy by the name of Molieri, and he talked a lot. So I come backstage, and Molieri's there. He starts talking to me. He's telling me his life history. He says, "You played beautiful, but I must tell you about me." And he's talking to me, and I missed my train. And because I missed the train, the contractor of the orchestra comes through, and he says, "Wigler, you have to play another audition at the finals." I didn't know that. So I went and I played the finals. After the finals, I found out that I did get the job. That girl who didn't get it was crying. The one who had played solo was crying. And the other guy, they both could have killed me, I guess. But I got the job. So I got the job, and I stayed there for 60 years. Now, after 60 years, I thought I would retire, you know. And the conductor was Wolfgang Sawallisch. Now, we had one boy who had been in a concentration camp, David Arbin. When this guy became conductor, Arbin quit. He couldn't stand this German conductor because he had been in a concentration camp. Anyway, I found that he was a very fine musician, very good, and I never thought about him as a German, really. But one day, after all my years, I get called into his office. We were on tour in Italy, and I get a call from Wolfgang Sawallich. He wants to see me. So I walk into his office. He says, "You have been here for many decades." I said, "That's true." I said, "Yeah." I said, "And you've been here for many decades too." He wasn't that young. He said, "Maybe you should think of perhaps retiring and let somebody else take that, do the work." I said, "You know, Mr. Savalas, I don't plan to retire." I said, "I was in the First Army coming up Omaha Beach. You were in the Wehrmacht shooting at us." I said, "It took a lot of courage to come up that beach." And I'm not kidding, it did. At any moment you could hit a bomb to be shot. It was terrible. And he said, "You know, you probably have a lot of courage too. You were in the German. It wasn't easy for you either." I said, "But I will stay in this orchestra as long as I want, and I'm not going to leave." And I left. I just walked out on him. The next day he was calling, "Mr. Wigler, how are you?" And after that I said, "I'm not going to quit this job." I stayed until I was 91 because of him. 91 years old, I was still on tour with the orchestra. There were people waiting to push me on the train track, I'm sure. They couldn't get rid of me. But you know, when you're in an orchestra, people have students, and they try to get their students a job. Probably somebody said, "Do I have a good student? Wigler's been here a long time. Why don't you give my student a job?" Yeah, maybe it makes sense. Anyway, that was my career. And then, as serving on the committee in the orchestra, I ran into many moments where I had to fight, actually, Eugene Ormandy, the conductor. And,
We've heard the stories.
then one day, Ormandy puts me on the first stand, and I get a $25 raise. We're sitting in the first stand. I'm sitting on there, and at every concert, he's looking at me, shaking his head. So I went back and I said, "You know, Mr. Ormandy," I said, "I'm sitting here and you keep looking at me with those looks." I said, "It's very annoying. Don't do it." The next day, I was in the last stand. Izzy Schwartz, another Islanders orchestra, is going to move up, and he moves up. Then he's asking Ormandy for the raise. "What about the raise?" He says, "You got to ask Wigler." I sat in the last stand the whole year getting a $30 raise. So but anyway, finally, I decided to leave. So anyway, I went through a lot, I'd say, serving on committees and getting beaten up and all that. And as I say, the first 100 years was tough. But now, everything seems better. And I want to thank certain people. There's Louis Chong, who's been so valuable to me, a friend. And his father, Dr. Chong. They've all been just great to me. His wife, Chi Chun. That little boy, Russell, his 70th wife. I owe a lot to these people. They saved me from a lot. In Philadelphia, I was alone, and I had fallen once, fractured my back, and I had a very difficult time walking, taking care of myself. And that house there was upstairs in the basement, was leaking. It was time to sell, and the Chong family, they thought maybe I should come out and live here. Louis was a great help to me, and I got a house here, and I owe everything to the Chong family at this point. They've done so much for me, and I appreciate it. Louis, thank you so much. You've been a great guy.
Yeah, you have your driver's license.
I took the automobile
Glad you
test.
passed the driving test.
It's important for me to drive. If I can't drive, I'm stuck. People have to help me. So Louis Chong went with me to get the driver's test. I thought it would be easy. I flunked 4 times. Five times I flunked. And then finally I said, maybe we should go to another place. And we did. We went to some. But I'll tell you this, Louis, they were afraid of him. The reason I got the license is because they were so scared of Louis. He was yelling at the guy. He said he was asking my age and all that stuff. But Louis was pounding on the table. Finally, the guy got frightened. He said, let him go. And I finally did pass it. Then his son Russell was listening, and he said, "Did he finally make it?" Well, I did. So I could drive until I'm 104. So if anybody wants to drive with me, you're welcome. It turns out that some people don't want to, for some reason, don't want to drive with me. Anyway, I want to thank everybody that's here. You've all been great friends to me and over the years. And I get many letters, calls from people in the orchestra thanking me and to be their friend. Said I had a great sense of humor. They were happy to sit with me, and it was this great thing. So here I am now, with another 100 years coming up. So I'll see you at my next birthday 100 years from now.
Another 100 years. 100 years.
Cheers. Cheers.